and I start live in Facebook. So it's all from Zoom. It doesn't require any other devices. So let's start again, Oliver. I'm sorry, but could you say again a few words about yourself?
Sure.
And
I keep that
and
there.
your wonderful FootNotes program. It's so important. Such nowadays when we live in systems that were not created for us. We live in the systems, educational, pharmaceutical, medical, food industry, financial system. All these systems, they don't have the goal to give us any goods.
Sure.
They have different goals, and a lot of people have profit from these working systems, but they are not about us, not for us. And now it's time when we should somehow find the way to live, to build our systems, to build our circles, to find our tribe, to be responsible in all meanings for our life, financial, personal, health, food, everything. And it's about, I think that for us, the way out is in developing functions of right hemisphere, because other systems, they are very left-brained. And with all my respect to the achievements of left hemisphere, but we shouldn't forget about functions that help us of right hemisphere. And we left hemisphere dominates too much. So your program, I see the core, the essence in your program. It's to give a chance to develop right hemisphere in schools. Yes, even if we don't talk about family education, at schools you have this chance if you are acquainted with your program. So tell more about your story. And
well, my story, this as per usual, there's so many different ways I want to respond to what you've just shared, because all of it, all the things you've just said are relevant things for us to talk about, maybe in stages. But for now, I just feel the important thing to say is that I agree that we have got to a point where we don't even recognize anymore how much left hemisphere thinking has created restrictions rather than freedoms, in the way that we think for ourselves, the way that we respond to our intuition, the way that we allow others to be unique, to just get along together and allow difference as a strength in a community. So to give an example of one of the situations that I had that really made me feel that I needed to move into this as a proper program that I could offer even to governments, to educational systems, if they'd hear me. Why not try? Because I'm passionate enough about it, and there's enough evidence that this is something that really, as you say, opens up the opportunity to use the right hemisphere thinking, which there's more and more evidence to show that it actually has more of an accuracy to truth, whatever that is in life. And here's an example that really struck for me. I wasn't expecting it. I was invited for a period of 5 years to work alongside young offenders. Young children, some of them hadn't offended yet to the point where they were being taken away from their families, but there was a warning in place. They got in trouble with the police or something like that. Or they were just being so difficult to teach in a classroom that they were being excluded. And I worked with about 60 young boys and girls, but predominantly boys. And I would say 58 of those 60 responded very, very quickly to FootNotes because it gave them the ability to work with their intuition and respond in a unique moment by moment way. And that's what they needed. They had a label of being badly behaved, and I just didn't see it. They were never badly behaved with me. They were very respectful. I think my colleagues around me couldn't quite, they were amazed really. And it's, some people say, well, it's because of your charisma, Oliver, and because you're passionate about it. It was you, it wasn't the program. But now that the program's been running for 25 years, I can say, no, it's the message that goes with the program. The activity that the program offers is a really simple thing that any parent, any individual can take on board. We don't have to be taught it in a school, but yes, if you can offer it into a school situation, then great. But what these young guys were able to do was they were able to use FootNotes immediately. Didn't matter how much they'd missed out of school, or what order of expected learning outcomes they'd arrived at by the time they were 12. I was working with 11-year-olds who couldn't read and write. But I think as we were chatting the other evening, that, one child learned to read using the New Scientist instead of any reading schemes. Once he harnessed the use of FootNotes, this visual thinking program. And it's really simple, but it is really powerful because it is so different to this left brain hemisphere, this linear logical way that education has chosen to, in the main, go with, from the point of view of testing. And now I wonder whether it's more than that. You could get a bit conspiracy theory and say that there are agendas in some situations where it's easier to examine somebody, a whole group of people, with the same question and require the same answer, as a way of saying, well, that's a good way of us streaming individuals and deciding how we as a community work. And we know that in some, it's certainly cultures that I've worked in for example, in the European Union, there are a number of education systems that make a decision for the child by the time they're 11, depending on how they pass their tests, as to what's being offered to them. And so that's what got me passionate, because I thought, well, do we give up? If the system is so big that we, as just one individual family, what could we do with that? Then we need something that comes in alongside and says, okay, if nothing else, this is a survival strategy for keeping you as an individual in tune with yourself and capable of translating what you know and the way that you think into whatever format is required of you, because that's life. Sadly, sometimes we don't get to say things or promote things in the way that we'd like to. Not everybody wants to listen to the way that we do it, but at least why not give us the opportunity to think and learn and research and prepare what we want to share with the rest of the world in our preferred way. And the big breakthrough for me, and I believe it was the big breakthrough for these young offenders, these guys that had just been told, you're naughty, you got a label for disruption and whatever else.
Deviant behavior, it's called, yeah?
Sure. They needed the ability to say, my language, my first language, isn't any of the languages that have been given to me by society. It's my language. And FootNotes gives me the ability to work with my language first. Okay, you can't test in that language, but you can think in that language to the stage that you then say, okay, what language do you want it in? Do you want it in the English language? Do you want it in Russian? Do you want it in video?
In music,
language,
in chemistry language, in dance
in
language,
art, exactly.
in art.
The whole languages. Let's not just focus on the ones that are given to us. There are so many ways, and I've been a lecturer for 20 years in a university, encouraging students and their tutors where possible to think about what language do you want to share your findings. What is this research that you've done for 3 years, and what's the best way of showing it nowadays? Maybe somebody should visit your website, which doesn't have a linear track. The viewer, the visitor, gets to decide how they learn what you learnt or how you want to share it. But sadly, that couldn't be tested. And so we had to say, well, FootNotes is for you. It's personally for you. Keep it in your back pocket. Not everybody will accept it, but it might keep you sane, or it might actually give you the ability to do what you do comfortably, which is dual process. These guys, virtually all of these guys that I was talking about here with that label, all found it difficult to sit still. They were dual processors. Simply, they needed to do more than one thing at a time, and sitting down and listening wasn't enough for their brain activity to keep them in track, and you know, using all their abilities in sync, because we're multi-layered, and that's why
absolutely we are
FootNotes needed to develop from being just a visual thinking program to a visual multi-layered thinking program. It's not just about being visual, it's about the multi-layeredness of you and the uniqueness of the way that you think, whether it's you have a dominance of visual or kinesthetic or auditory learning styles. You know, we don't even know, a lot of us in society, what our balance is. What is your visual, auditory, kinesthetic balance? I love doing that as an activity with people. In an hour, I can help people understand themselves at 60 years old for the first time. Many people come to me and just say, wow, if I'd done that when I was a kid, I'd be doing a completely different thing in life. It's massive. And you're right, this left hemisphere thinking can so easily be a trap for so many kinds of learners, even if they don't know it, because our intuition tells us, though, doesn't it? Sometimes, you know, lots and lots of people get to the end of their degree or get into their career and they realize that they did it because they could do it, not because they wanted to do it.
Because of their parents, because of social pressure. Oliver, I wrote down some of your phrases. I love the idea to be in tune with yourself. It's exactly the answer for all the problems that we have in society, in relationships. First of all, in relationships with yourself, to be in tune with yourself. But could I ask you, what is exactly visual thinking? What is it about? How is it? How it works? How do you develop this?
Okay, well,
thinking. I want to ask a lot of questions about, you know, intuition of mother's heart, how to upbring our kids, a lot of questions. But let's discuss what is visual thinking.
Okay. Well, visual thinking is could be defined simply as do you prefer to think and remember things in visual terms? If I say to you if I say dog, do you see a dog? if I ask somebody to close their eyes and just say, okay, I'm just going to speak the word dog, what did you see? And I've done this for years in universities with hundreds of students in an hour's session. So I've spoken to thousands of students, and I would say only 2% see the word, the spelling. The rest see the dog.
The animal.
Or an animal or a collection of dogs. When it's in autism mode, it's hilarious or exciting or whatever, because they don't just see one dog, they see all the dogs they've ever seen in their lives, for example, which is quite intriguing. And I get some pretty intense looks from some of the teachers, and they say, do you realize this child is now going to want to draw every single dog they've ever seen in their lives? But we have a strategy for saying you don't have to do that right now. But anyway, the point is, then there's a small percentage, but another type of person who sees the word and the image. And then there is a small percentage, even smaller percentage, that just heard it but just didn't see anything at all. But that's, I think, very unusual. And I think it's, in my experience, when we run it again and they're feeling more comfortable about the question and why I was doing it, they do see something. So that means answering that question, visual thinking could be as simple as actually listening to the image that is being formed in your mind step by step through life. They say that 82% of any visually capable thinker uses 82% of their brain activity to process visual information. So we're very good at processing visual information, but sometimes if that visual information has no reference on what we're learning, that could explain why so many individuals find it difficult to sit up in class and focus. I like going into schools and saying, who's good at daydreaming? Because actually it's the daydreaming that's using the 82%, because it needed to do something with it, while they were trying to focus on this small percentage of audio skills while the teacher was speaking. We just needed to say, wow, visual thinking could be really powerful for you. Let's use the 82% availability and match it with what we want to listen to the teacher with. But we need to give you the permission to think visually on topic, not about the dog that's much more interesting walking outside, looking through the window, but instead focusing on the subject and the challenge of, how do I see that? What am I seeing right now? And then how would I draw that? Don't worry about drawing skills, just how, if I was brilliant at drawing, how would I begin that drawing? And that's visual thinking in basic terms, I would say, was, just getting going with it. But visual thinking is something that I picked up this term when I started to hear about Einstein and his coming together the theories of relativity and what have you. He said that he discovered all of this when he was lying in a field. He had his eyes closed and he was just imagining, and he said he saw all of these thoughts dancing in his mind and they made sense there, and he was able to see the incredible complexity.
But the same how Mendeleev discovered periodic table of Mendeleev.
I didn't know that. Wow.
He saw it in a dream. He saw this consequence of these elements and then just draw it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And so, I like your example with this word, dog. And we both, Russian and English, we have alphabetic languages. And can you imagine to make this test with those who are native speakers with hieroglyphic languages?
Wow.
For them, it will be different story. Yeah, hieroglyph, it's like a picture.
Yes.
Like symbol in one word, one symbol, no, two.
Yeah. Well, I think visual thinking in some languages is very separate. in Latin-based languages, for example, where it's not separate in the languages that you're describing. So, for example, I was working in an international school in Geneva, and a 12-year-old Chinese boy arrived into the school, and they discovered dyslexia suddenly, really, really chronic dyslexia, because this child couldn't learn because he couldn't enter the world of Latin-based language. And suddenly dyslexia that was not prevalent, was not an issue for him in his first
Chinese.
language. He came into a real wall. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting, because that's the wall that I felt as a child dyslexic. The other thing I just wanted to say about visual thinking is very important. There's a difference, I believe, between visual thinking and visual responding. And we have become we're very culturally inspired, and what's the word? We're in tune with visual responding because that's how advertising comes our way. That's how we've learned to watch the screen, and we've become very good visual responders. But I would say that's not the same as visual thinking. I don't think it's the same neurological process. I believe that it's still useful. Certainly, I have a client who works in the forces at the moment, and he has to work with machinery, and he has to he has to learn how to use this machinery before he gets into the real machinery. And so he uses simulators, and he's really good at it because he's a visual thinker, and he's become very good at being a visual responder. So you can hear where I'm going with this. A lot of the kids that they say, oh, he doesn't want to do anything other than play on his game, the gaming, the Xbox, the whatever it is. This is something that he's been able to encourage himself to do as a visual responder. But it's not visual responding is following in the main. Yes, it's being able to see anticipate what's going to happen next in the game, or how you're driving. These are all very good skills, but multi-layered thinking happens, I think, when you are visually thinking rather than responding, because the neurological activity is very different.
And I agree with you. I agree that it's different. And one thing is visual programming, like what we see with algorithms of advertisement, of social media. It's all visual. This is programming of people. And another thing is personal responsibility and thinking. And
yeah. So even to go further down the road, when I run the reading program, I take the images away from the reader. They don't like me for a few minutes, but then they realize that the other visual thinking, imagination images start arriving, and they're much more powerful, and then they find that they are able to read. It's very, very hard to persuade teachers to move away from the idea that if a child can't read, then you need to give them more pictures to trigger, to help them, to lead them along. But my experience is this is why some children learn better with the New Scientist, I've found, with FootNotes rather than a reading book. So it's profoundly different if you listen to visual thinking response in your mind. And I think the filtering system, which is of course left brain hemisphere thinking, the filter is saying not needed, not needed. And it's almost not even activating. And so I think what FootNotes does is it gives you the ability to, sometimes quite uncomfortable, but it helps you to realize that some of those filters shouldn't be working right now. We need to shut those filters down, because the visual thinking could be going on, but the filter says, no, not needed right now. You just need to just remember what you were told just a few minutes ago. That's all. Nothing else. Don't think any further on it. Don't use your imagination. That could get you into trouble. All the things that are linked with visual thinking sometimes I think are shut down by this linear logical processing. It's very difficult, but you know, I'm visiting a country where people are not really allowed to homeschool in the way that they'd like to. So some people are,
but somehow they avoid.
they do.
As we know.
Yeah.
You know about homeschooling, and just I was listening to you and was always thinking about my little ones, and everything what you talk about studying process at schools, at universities, but it's all also about parenting. How difficult sometimes it is to accept the uniqueness of your children. And it's everyday work, because every day some situations happen when you need to change your point of view, your perspective, your just angles, always from different like cameras, to look, to observe their behavior and just to let it be.
Yes.
They have different, no, if to talk in neurological terms, different frequencies. Their brain works not like your brain does. So just to accept this. Why we do accept this with cats, dogs, with neighbors, kids of neighbors? Why it's so difficult sometimes to accept with your own? We are so family scenarios, programs work. We are so programmed. Our brain is, we know how it should be, when it should be, how quickly, in what composition, where, with whom. We know everything. Just we don't know how to accept.
That's right.
And to give a chance to be different.
Yeah. And that requires courage,
Yes.
depending on where you are, because I've worked with a lot of young people that even their family doesn't understand them in that situation, you know, because they are so unique.
In this situation, I work with families as a therapy practitioner. Exactly, this is the work. Therapy helps to, to break like glass stone, not stone, glass wall between parents and their children. Or if it's adopted kids, then just to build relationships, family. The level of relationships is very high, warm, reliable, healthy attachment. Yes, therapy. But let's talk about this maybe next time. And honestly, I want to ask you so many more questions, but I see that Richard starts working now, and now it's my turn to to look after kids. So we are balancing each other. We are homeschooling, and when I have my work, Richard is with our kids. When he starts his sessions, I'm with them.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for our next meeting with you, Oliver. Just nice to meet you, nice to communicate, nice to know that this happens. Communication on the same wave. Покажи нам, иди сюда. Alex shows me what he built from Lego.
Look at that.
Screen.
Amazing.
Wow. That is amazing.
Is it that Lego that was Daddy's 40 years ago? When Daddy was 10 years old, he was playing with the same Lego. Oliver, thank you so much. I'm very grateful that you participated.
Likewise, very pleased to be in this conversation, and
very important things.
We can learn in the moment as well. We're learning from one another, and hopefully those that are listening can relate, resonate with what we're saying, and that's really important, because together we can actually start sharing that conversation. Hello.
Someone woke up. Moje солнце.
Bless her.
Sleepy eyes. Моя
Yeah.
золотая. Покажи чуть-чуть. Я сейчас с тобой буду играть, моя ласточка. 5 минут. Что? Okay.
Okay, so until next time, whenever next time is, very happy to continue this conversation and see where it goes.
It's very important, to live and to bring up kids without feeling of any tests, without feeling of any ceilings, limits. We don't know what will be. So just way without endless.
That's right.
Eternity in front of us.
Yeah.
Just this.
I mean, it's amazing to think that
and this is right hemisphere. This is exactly right hemisphere. This feeling of life.
Yeah. It's really important to remember, I think, that our bodies in the main are reconditioned every 7 weeks, isn't it? In the main, there are certain things, but we're constantly changing. So every morning we wake up with a whole new however many million cells that are brand new and have responded to the way that we are responding to life. And so every day we get to make very good steps towards change. And conversely, that explains why, if waking up every day with new cells responding to how we are learning and the way we're being influenced, that explains why we can be so far off where we want to be sometimes, because this is happening every single day. But I just love the fact that when the dawn rises, when the new day rises, we really are new. It's a brand new day every day, and new availabilities in our thinking and our abilities.
Very deep themes, a lot to talk, waiting for the next stage of our dialogue. Just wonderful. Thank you very much. Those who were listening to us, we are waiting for your comments, questions. We will be happy to answer. And I think next time I will ask you more precisely about this visual thinking, and just to draw it, to make experiment with me or with my kids, maybe.
Sure.
Just let's do it in practice. Let's give some practice. That will be a good continuation. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Hope today it's Monday, so I wish you productive week. I wish all of us productive week.
Productive week. Yeah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Bye.
Bye-bye.